This is Dom Renna, joined by Kevin DeLury, and the NYR Zone podcast starts right now. And welcome inside this week's special edition of the NYR Zone podcast. It's a trade deadline edition of the NYR Zone podcast. And joining me to discuss some of the trades around with the Rangers and the NHL is longtime friend of the podcast and on Twitter, Kevin DeLury. Kevin, how you doing today?
Good, man. How are things? Appreciate you having me on.
Things are going well. I mean, trade deadline, not much went down today just in general. I think there was a total of a little bit over 20 trades that went down if you combine all the trades from this week. Probably about maybe 16, 17 today. So not much action on the deadline itself.
Yeah, definitely disappointing from a hockey fan perspective. It's always one of the more, exciting days of the year. Definitely one of my favorites. When I used to run the old New York Rangers blog, I used to get real excited for trade deadline. You look at your Twitter, you got the TSN trade tracker going, and your friends are texting you, and it was like you had your own little battle station, for the blog. So, but now it's definitely tempered a little bit. I think that the new. Well, not the new, but the point system with the, overtime or the shootout loss and the overtime loss, you get a point. Every team is virtually in it right now. There's probably only a handful of teams that are actually under 500. So, everybody thinks they're in it and nobody wants to be a seller. So it's really hard to pull a trade at the trade deadline these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at it standings-wise, if you take away the overtime losses and just look at record-wise, the Rangers are actually in second place behind the Capitals. They have more wins than the Penguins and the Blue Jackets. So this whole overtime playoff system, it's kind of an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah, definitely, and obviously we want to get into the trades and stuff. But, yeah, I think they really have to change the point system eventually to maybe more like the Olympic system where you're getting 3 points for a win. And then maybe 2 points for an overtime win, and then maybe you get a point if you lose in the shootout, because that's such a coin flip. You'd hate for a team to get nothing if they lose in the shootout. But I don't think a team should get a point at all for losing in overtime. That's sort of ridiculous. Yeah. So I think they need to look at the point system real hard and think about changing it. Having said that, the NHL is all about making money. So the more teams that are in it, later in the season, the better it is for the NHL and their bottom line, because, the arenas and on teams that are, towards the first or second wild card, they're going to be packed every day. But if those teams aren't in it because they aren't getting those sort of loser points, it's going to hurt them at the gate.
Yeah, definitely. So let's get into the trade deadline. Let's talk about some of the moves the Rangers made first. This is obviously a Ranger podcast, so we care about that over the entire NHL. We'll look at the entire NHL winners and losers a little bit later. The Rangers had 3 deals over the last 2 days. 2 of them were minor league trades, so not really much of an impact on the big club. The 2 minor league deals were Justin Fontaine to Edmonton for Taylor Beck, who's going to help out with Hartford down there, and they traded Matt Bodie to Buffalo for another prospect. Bodie, Jeff Gorton said yesterday that Bodie just wanted a fresh start, so he'll be looking to get that fresh start with Buffalo. Looking at the big trade the Rangers made, obviously they did not get Shattenkirk. We'll get into Shattenkirk a little bit later on. They acquired Brendan Smith from the Detroit Red Wings for a second-round pick in 2018 and a third-round pick in 2017. That second-round pick is the pick from Ottawa they acquired on the Derek Brassard, Mika Zibanejad trade. So let's look at this from the Rangers standpoint, Kevin, with Brendan Smith. He's going to bring a solid play on the back end, but the problem that might become now is when Girardi and Klein are back, when it's going to be a full roster with defensemen. They're all going to be healthy. So my first question I want to know is, when fully healthy, who is not going to play?
Yeah, to be honest, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, you would assume that Clendening is probably going to come out of the lineup, although he's been one of their best defensemen over the last couple of weeks. So I think it would be real difficult for Vigneault to even take him out of the lineup. But as has been the case since Vigneault has come on board here, Dan Girardi's sort of the darling in his eyes. He sort of can't do any wrong. So I don't think there's any way that Girardi does not get back in the lineup, which unfortunately may mean the end. Well, I guess Kempfer will come out first.
They sent him down today.
Oh, did they? I didn't even see that. So yeah,
he was just reassigned.
Yeah,
this morning.
Exactly. So when Klein, I guess, will be the first guy back when he comes in for Kemper. But when Girardi's ready, I got to assume that Clendening is the guy who comes out, unless Holden. I mean, Holden's been struggling a bit with Stahl. I mean, that pair has definitely, slipped a bit. Holden had such a great start to the season when he was, he got all that unexpected offense out of him, and he's really sort of slowed down, and he's definitely had a tough time in the defensive zone. The other night against Columbus, him and Stahl were on the ice for the first 4 goals of the game, which is never a good thing. So, Holden may be a candidate to sit out as well, especially if Clendening keeps it up. I mean, and God forbid Vigneault ever sits Shea. I mean, I think there would be a riot.
That's my biggest concern. I've been interacting with some Ranger fans on Twitter over the last few weeks, and I've always said, if Brady Shea comes out of the lineup, I think we need to start a riot outside of the Garden, because he's been on some run this season, and he's a defenseman that Alain Vigneault wants for this system. If you really think about it, he's outside of McDonough. And Clendening. He's really the only puck moving defenseman they had, and he had a great game last night in the offensive zone. Probably one of the few defensemen you can say that was actually on point last night. I mean, I did like Kampfer's game a little bit. I mean, there was obviously some mistakes there, but my biggest issue with this whole with this trade is it's another lefty. Now, yes, he can play on the right side, and it doesn't matter how you shoot, on which side you play. But this Ranger lineup now is left-handed heavy on the blue line.
Yeah, it's a concern. I mean, especially when you're setting up on the power play, I think is really when it comes into play, where you're looking for those one-timers, as Valicette always calls it, as you get the pass through the Royal Road, and you're setting up for those one-timers. Obviously, it's difficult if you're on your offhand. And with the problems that the Rangers are having on the power play, I mean, it could ultimately cause a problem. I think a couple of years ago they were all left-handed on the power play also. I think, and it really seemed to cause a problem. I mean, the power play has been a problem for the Rangers, I think, before I was even born. But it's amazing that they can never just sort of figure it out. It's like, just get bodies to the net, shoot it from the point, and good things happen. But it's a bit concerning that they did bring in another left-hander. You would have liked to have seen a righty come in. But, Smith is a solid defender. I mean, he's obviously an upgrade. I guess we saw today in practice that Vigneault had him paired with McDonough, his old teammate from Wisconsin. So there is, some familiarity there, which is nice. That'll help definitely get him sort of integrated into the lineup, into the locker room, I'm overall I'm happy with the trade. I mean, you'd always like to see them pay a little bit less, but the Rangers obviously had a big time need on the blue line, and Smith fills that.
He definitely fills that. And one thing you have to remember, he's not going to play the power play. He is not known for his offense, so don't expect him to be a hero when it comes to that power play, which is really what everyone kind of wanted with Shattenkirk coming, supposedly coming, because Shattenkirk is a great talent when it comes to the power play. We'll talk about his trade to Washington a little bit later. I want to get into some of the injuries that happened today that I thought at least could have affected the Rangers' trade deadline mentality. The big one for me is Jesper Fast out 2 to 3 weeks with the shoulder separation from the hit from Ovechkin last night.
Yeah, that's such a shame that he ends up going down, because Fast and Lindbergh have had such great chemistry lately. It's sort of like the Swedish connection. They're really playing off each other real well, and that fourth line was becoming a real benefit for this Rangers squad. They were real dangerous. I mean, when Vigneault can run, or any team can run 4 lines, your team is only going to be that much better. Where the top 9 don't have to worry about sort of the defensive responsibilities, and they could just focus on offense. It's always a good thing. So it's a real hit, a real blow to the Rangers lineup. And yeah, I was hoping that they would look to bolster the 4th line anyway, because they had Buchnevich on the 4th line, and now they have Peary, and VC was down there. Those guys really aren't 4th line players. And I'd be concerned going into the postseason. I like, not everybody likes it, but I do like having a shutdown 4th line. I think, in the Rangers run in 2014, they had that with Dominic Moore, Brian Boyle, and Dorsett and Carcillo. They were real. They had a real advantage over their opponents, being able to put them out, and they could play against Crosby and Ovechkin and try to shut them down. So, I would have liked to see them go after. My main focus and the guy I was pushing was Iginla, and and the Kings got him super cheap. A 4th round pick, plus Colorado picked up half his salary. They basically just gave him away. I wanted them to look that way initially anyway, and then when Foss goes down, I would have expected them to try to bring in someone for a bottom 3, but a couple of other guys that were out there, I'm sort of skimming the trades today that I was a little upset with. Dwight King.
That was a big one.
Yeah, from the Kings over to the Canadians, and obviously, I guess we can go into the trades a little bit, what each team was doing. It was sort of puzzling that the Kings would trade away Dwight King, but then bring in Iginla. Yeah. It seemed a little baffling. But anyway, those are the type of guys I would have liked to seen the Rangers maybe bring in a Steve Ott, even a Hansen from the Canucks who went to the Sharks. Those are the 4th line guys I would have liked to have seen the Rangers get. And especially with Foss going down, I'm not sure what they're going to do with the 4th line now.
See, now I threw this out there earlier today on Twitter. I wonder if they consider calling up Rivik, because Foss is a penalty killer. Now, the whole thing, Buchnevich will probably get the call, but he's not that type of player that the Rangers are losing with Foss. Foss brings so much more to the table than I think a lot of fans realize what he does. There's going to be a hole on that penalty kill, which has been struggling lately. And when Rivik was up here, he did a good job on the PK. I really thought when everyone was really healthy that he was going to stick around and be that extra forward, Yeah,
that's actually a really good point. Rivik was really impressive when he came up. He really provided zero offense, but you're not really looking for that out of the 4th line. But he drove possession when he was out there. You rarely saw him pinned in his own zone, and he was real good at driving possession, which was nice. Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing him back up with the Rangers. I like you mentioned, I think Buchnevich probably gets the call back up, and one way they may want to go, and I mentioned this on my blog yesterday, is that Grabner's really cooled off over the last couple of weeks. It may be time to just put him back on the 4th line.
And he got hurt today, too.
Yeah, that's right. Where Clendenning ran into him.
Apparently, Clendenning, them ran into each other, and it was just a big deal all over social media. I know you were taking some hits defending, not even defending Steve Zappa of Tuesday, but just talking about it.
Yeah, and I think Zappa, after he sort of jokingly sent out a tweet that, Clendenning has to watch out who he hits, or, however he sort of phrased it, he said he thought that Grabner was fine, and hopefully he is. Because I think getting him down on the 4th line, I think that really helps with the lineup, where you could then move Buchnevich onto the 3rd line where he really belongs with Hayes and Miller, or however AV wants to construct it. I think that just makes them a better overall lineup if you can get Grabner on that 4th line with Lindbergh and Foss when he gets back. I think that's a much better 4th line, and really fills out the lineup better than it is right now.
Buchnevich playing tonight in Hartford. He currently has a goal and an assist. He assisted on the newly acquired Ranger, Dan Kadanecki, and he finished off with a beautiful pass from Nicholas Jensen, who we saw earlier this season. So maybe if Buchnevich gets the call, we'll see him play on the third line. One other guy that I'm kind of concerned about is Mika Zibanejad. He did practice today. They did say, AV did say that he looked so much better than he did yesterday. But a lot of what the Rangers are doing are going to really depend on him. And now, yes, he struggled, but to me, he's looked like he's gotten better over his last 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, he looks like he's sort of found his game again, which is tough that he did get injured, sort of breaks that up a little bit. But, he's despite the fact that he has been a little bit better lately, he scored that big overtime goal, obviously, against New Jersey. He had the shootout winner against the Maple Leafs. They still need a little bit more from him, I think. It's taken him a little bit of time to get going from his other injury when he broke his leg or his ankle.
I think it was his fibula or something like that, whatever that is.
Yeah, exactly. So it's taken him a little while to sort of get back into the routine and sort of get his skates onto him. So, he is going to be a huge key to any potential success that this team has. I mean, he had gone, I think, 16 games without a goal before he scored that goal in New Jersey. And not just him. I mean, Derek Stepan now is at 18 games without a goal. And what was amazing was the two of them at that point were 16 games, the two of them without scoring. Their top 2 centers had scored in 16
they're still winning, though.
games. And that's what, I was going to say, they were still winning, which is absolutely amazing. I mean, because they were getting contributions from Fost and Lindbergh, and throughout the lineup, which is nice. And that's the great part about having the depth that the Rangers have. But unfortunately, over the last week or so, their offense has sort of faded a bit. I didn't even realize this. I noticed it after the game last night that actually they've scored 2 or fewer goals in 6 of the last 7 games. And when you have a defense that has as many holes in it as the Rangers does, that's a recipe for failure. And we've seen it the last 2 games where, in Washington and the Blue Jackets are good teams. So I don't want to completely kill the Rangers, but we're not at their best the last 2 games.
Yeah, definitely. And the Rangers, they came out pretty well against Washington. I mean, I was watching that game while I was in a class last night, so I was trying to pay attention and look at the game as well. But I was looking at the game. To me, that was almost an exact type of mirroring of the game they played against Washington a couple weeks ago on Sunday, where they came out really strong. Then they had a goal taken away. Then Washington comes back, ties it, but obviously the Rangers won that game a few weeks ago, but they ended up losing the game and just took their foot off the gas pedal.
Yeah, it's definitely frustrating to see them come out that strong, and then you just wonder what happens. Where does it fall apart? And I think one of the big problems that they're having is on the power play, as we mentioned before. They jumped out to the 1-0 lead. They were dominating possession-wise. They had the puck in the Capital zone for almost virtually all the first period. And then they had 2 power plays, and they couldn't do anything with it. And Washington probably gets a little bit of a lift there, where they're able to kill off some big penalties, and then they're off. I mean, and they're so talented, when you have the Ovechkins and they bring in Shattenkirk and Johansson and, all these guys, and, you can only keep them down for so long. And, the Rangers really have to take advantage of those power play opportunities, and they just weren't able to.
I mean, they're showing with Washington, they can keep up with them. It's just something happens in between that first and second intermission. Either it's them saying, "Okay, we have the lead. Let's go on our shell that we don't normally go into until the third period," or Washington was just that better the last 2 games, and they made the adjustments, and the Rangers refused to adjust back to them. It's something we're going to have to see, because in order to get to the Cup, you're going to have to go through Washington at some point. Whether if you're playing them in the Eastern Conference Finals from going through the Atlantic, or playing them in the second round if you survive a series with Pittsburgh. So let's move on and look at the deadline as a whole. And for me, which was really surprising, is I think this is the most draft picks I've seen traded in an NHL trade deadline over the last few years.
Yeah, they've really sort of are getting clever with the way they're making trades these days, with whether it's a bunch of draft picks or it's retaining a lot of the salary. There's so much more strategy involved with these trades these days. It's definitely interesting. But I think a lot of that, especially with the draft picks, goes along with the fact that I think every team thinks they're in it. Like we had mentioned before, they don't want to give up, assets that are on their current roster because they believe they're in it. So let's give up a couple of picks. We'll worry about the future next year and the next couple of years. And so that's the way teams are rolling. I think that's a byproduct of, the conversation we had earlier, just about all the teams being in it, and they don't want to give up what they have because they think they still have a chance at the playoffs.
So let's talk winners and losers here. I think and I don't know if you'll agree with this, but I think one team that's getting overlooked as a winner is Pittsburgh. I love what they did on the blue line. I think the Ron Hainsey trade, even though he is a little bit older, is going to be a big deal for them, because just think about their defensive core when they get Mata back and when they get Daly back. It's gonna be a pretty good one. They did a really good job improving their team without really making too much big of a move. And I believe they also got Mark Streit, who had a very interesting day today, going from Philadelphia to Tampa Bay, then from Tampa Bay to Pittsburgh, ending in a bad situation, going to a bad situation to a great situation. I don't know how you feel about what Pittsburgh did, but I think they did a pretty good job this deadline, filling in holes to a depleted blue line.
Yeah, the rich got richer today. Unfortunately, the two sort of best teams in the Eastern Conference, and the teams that are probably standing in the way of the Rangers, the Capitals, and Penguins, were probably the two biggest winners at the trade deadline, sadly. But yeah, I like what the Penguins did as well. I mean, obviously up front, they're as good as it gets, with Crosby and Malkin and Hagelin and Kessel and everyone else that they have. And their problem is obviously they've had injuries on the blue line, and they brought in these two guys, and as if we didn't think they were good enough to begin with. Now they're that much better, and the Rangers should be tanking for the first wild card even more today than they were yesterday. So they were a big winner.
Let's talk Shattenkirk here, because all we heard about was he wants to come to the Rangers. Now, what everyone is forgetting is that Shattenkirk did not have a no-move clause or a no-trade clause. He was just simply declining contract extensions. I believe he declined one from Arizona over the summer, said no to Toronto at one point this year, and the most recent one, Tampa Bay. So we have to make that pretty clear. He did not have a no-trade clause. Those deals fell apart because Shattenkirk did not want to sign an extension. So he ends up with the rival Washington, the Washington Capitals. And I think one of the things that comes to mind with the Shattenkirk trade is one of the old adages we see in baseball with the Yankees and the Red Sox throughout the years is that neither team wanted the other to get better. I remember when Mark Teixeira was a free agent, he was close to signing with Boston, and then George Steinbrenner told Brian Cashman, sign Teixeira. He's not going to Boston. And I guess some are saying that that's what the Rangers should have done. But I really do like the idea that they did not get Shattenkirk. I don't know how you feel about that, but I put an article out a couple of weeks ago saying that they needed to avoid Shattenkirk at almost all costs, because you knew that the Blues were going to ask the Rangers for a crazy price.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100% there. I mean, one of the rumors was that Washington was asking for Buchnevich in a first. Yep. I mean, if Gordon did that, he was insane, especially because
he got crucified.
Absolutely. I mean, he got killed for giving up a second and third round pick for Brendan Smith. I mean, could you imagine if he traded Buchnevich?
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, so... I think Gordon did right by the Rangers. He did, he looked to the future. He's looking long term. I mean, there's no way you give up an asset like Buchnevich for a guy you could sign for, salary in the off season. So, I mean, I think that was the right move. I mean, I don't know if Gordon could have gotten, Armstrong, the Blues GM, to lower his price a bit, where maybe he could have traded, a Kovac or a Sean Day or something along those lines. I'm assuming he attempted to do that. And I can't imagine he wasn't, lowering his, trying to get a better deal. But, I think he made the smart move there. And, I can't imagine too many range. I mean, you're going to be upset because you didn't get a Shattenkirk, and, of course, he went to the Capitals. But, when you saw some of the price that went around, that, again, the rumor with Buchnevich, I mean, he made the correct call.
Oh, definitely. And I also did think the rumor out there was that the price was different for any other team other than the Rangers, because the Blues had a feeling that he was going to sign there anyway. So why not get more from the Rangers? And my big problem with the trade for Shacker is it was going to cost someone like that. Now, I'd probably rather give up a Buchnevich than a JT Miller or a Kevin Hayes because they're coming into a zone now. But, I mean, I'm very pleased with what Jeff Gorton did, and I would honestly say that the Rangers, even though they didn't really improve dramatically, they're not winners, but they did pretty okay this deadline. They did improve a weakness, which might become weaker when Girardi or Klein come back, but they did pretty well today for what they had to be given. Now, obviously, you'd like to, like we said before, fill in the hole from Jesper Foss being out, and we think Buchnevich is going to get the chance to do that. Moving on to some other interesting trades. I think one trade that's going really under the radar is the Ben Bishop trade to LA. That trade, I think, is going to work out perfectly for them, because if they get in and Quick's not 100%, they can rotate. Because remember, Ben Bishop is a very good goalie.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think Ranger fans know that more than anyone. I mean, he owned the Rangers, Ben Bishop. So yeah, I mean that's a pretty smart move out there in LA. And they were mentioning that the Kings schedule, as most NHL schedules are this month, I mean, it's very compact, a ton of back-to-backs. And
they have to fix that at one point. It can't be the same next year.
You
can just tell from the last two games, the Rangers look shot.
Yeah, I think that they're in the midst of like 13 games in 18 days or something like that. I mean, that's insanity. So, yeah, I mean, that has to change. And they were saying that was one of the biggest reasons that they decided to go after Bishop is, Quick is just coming back from the injury. They sort of want to ease him in. They don't want to just have him playing night after night after night. So, yeah, it's definitely a smart move on their end. Goalies catch fire in the playoffs, and you see it year after year. So if Quick sort of falters, they have the go-to guy on the bench, and Bishop, who's been there before. That's a real smart move.
And you saw that last year with Pittsburgh with Matt Murray and Marc-Andre Fleury, and Jim Rutherford, the GM of the Penguins, said it today on an NHL Network that he did not want to get rid of Fleury because that 1-2 tandem was really strong. Now, they might lose Murray or Fleury in the expansion draft, but if they win another cup, I don't think they'll be too upset about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a smart move. I mean, they saw it, last year. I mean, they saw it firsthand on the ice in front of them. You need to have two capable goaltenders. And, I mean, the Rangers have that as well. I mean, I think after what's gone on this season, I think, most Ranger fans will feel real confident if Lundqvist went down with an injury to have Ranta in there going into the playoffs. I mean, he's been as good as Lundqvist at certain points this season. So, you can't just have the backup who, is just in there to fill in and, you don't care if you win or lose. You're just really trying to get your starter a day off. I mean, these guys need to be top-level backups because you just never know when you're going to need them.
All right, and the last trade I want to take a look at is one that a lot of people are saying Arizona absolutely robbed Minnesota. Minnesota improved with getting Martin Hansel and Ryan White from the Minnesota Wild. Gave up a 2017 first-round pick, a 2018 second-round pick, a prospect, and a conditional pick in the 2019 draft. Makes Minnesota deeper down the middle and a big Western Conference, which they've been controlling. And, they're kind of telling their fans, just like Washington, that they're going all in this year.
Yeah, they gave up a lot, but I actually was okay with it. I think, sometimes you got to go for it. Minnesota has sort of been on the cusp there, and I think that's a good thing to show your fan base every once in a while that you're willing to, throw caution to the wind. And Hansel and White are solid pickups, and they're the type of players who thrive in the postseason. So I actually like the trade. They gave up a lot, but. I think when year after year you're seeing, it's the Blackhawks, it's the Kings, they're going for it this year. More power to them.
So we kind of got into this earlier, but do you think they should have done more? I mean, do you think they should have tried to flip Grabner and get a couple of picks like we've seen some other bloggers out there say, or try and move a Klein or a Holden for picks?
I mean, it's easy to say that you can move Klein or Holt. I mean, you still need another team that's interested in them. I mean, Buffalo couldn't move Franzen, or they didn't move Franzen. I mean,
I don't think they wanted to.
Yeah, I don't know what went on there, and I don't know what the market was. I mean, Klein is hurt right now.
Yeah.
He's old and he's on the decline, and he has another year on his contract. So, I mean, I wouldn't say he's the most enticing, defenseman that was on the market today. And even Holden, like we had mentioned before, has been struggling a bit lately, and he's showing some warts as well. So, would I like to see Gordon do more? Yeah, I just don't know what else may have been out there, that he could have gotten. And sure, I like Grabner on the team. I do. And I get the concern. I would have liked to see them, and they may do it. I like to see them, maybe make a trade with Las Vegas that they won't take him in the expansion draft. Sort of like here's a, third round pick and a handshake.
Yeah.
And can we have him for another year? Because, he has been very good for this team. And I mentioned it early, he's been struggling a bit. But his speed is it's so dangerous out there on the ice. He brings a dimension that not many teams have. On the PK, I mean, he seems to have a breakaway a game. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's so fun to watch. But I do see the other side of the ledger there as well. I mean, if you can get some assets, he's obviously playing way over his head this year. And if you could have gotten a GM to overpay, like the Wild did for Hansel and White, I mean, it wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world, because I think you'll agree. I mean, the Rangers, as constructed, really, are not cup contenders right now.
Right.
And especially after seeing what Pittsburgh and Washington did. So, and this is where I think looking at what the Rangers, did today and yesterday with Smith, you wonder where Gordon is going with the team. You made the move for Smith, who was a free agent at the end of the year. Was that a move for this year because you thought you had a chance, or is that a move, hey, I wanted to bring him in, let him get used to New York and like it here, and maybe we'll go on a little run and it'll make it that much easy for us to potentially sign him in the off season? I'm wondering where Gordon's head was at with the Smith move. Well,
Darren Dreger, after the trade went down, tweeted out that the Rangers are interested in extending him come July 1st after the draft. So it might have been a move long term. But then the real question is, who's going?
Yeah,
the odd man out to me is Brady Shea. I mean, who else is going to be out? Because you can still have Klein, you still have Girardi, Stahl's still under contract for a while. Holden has another year on his deal. The odd man out is Brady Shea, and he shouldn't be the odd man out. He's been one of the top rookie defensemen in the league. He might not have the points for it, and he might not be as solid as some of the other defensemen have defensively, but he's been one of the Rangers' most consistent D all year, except that stretch where he was scratched for the one game.
Yeah, I'm gonna hope, and I have faith. I have faith in AV. I don't know why. That he, because his personnel decisions have been baffling to say the least the last couple of years. But I think that Shea is going to be in there. It's either going to be Klein or Holden. I think that ends up sitting in the press box. Because especially Klein, I mean, he's been tough. He's been tough to watch this year. He's been banged up. He's injured. Like I said, he's old. He's on the decline. I just don't. If Shea ends up being the guy for whatever reason, I would just love to hear that reasoning. I just,
like I said, we're gonna riot.
I just can't even fathom what he could potentially say is the reason Shea isn't in there.
I don't think there really is an excuse. The only excuse you can make is probably the same reason why Buchnevich isn't in there, is that he's a rookie. But Shea has done 10 times better than what we've seen from Buchnevich lately. And I mean, I've gotten into an argument with a fan on Twitter today who was saying if he's Buchnevich, he's demanding to go back to Russia. But I'm like, all right, you might be a Buchnevich fan, but he's still a rookie. He still has to make his way in the league. I mean, Vesey spent time on the fourth line, worked his way back up, and Buchnevich has to do the same thing. AV did it with Miller, did it with Hayes, did it with Shea earlier in the year, did it with McElrath, didn't work with McElrath. But AV can get to these young guys, and I think a lot of people aren't giving him the credit that he deserves for developing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that totally. You see a lot of overreactions to AV's handling of rookies, whether it was Miller and Hayes, and and look how they turned out. I mean, some guys need this sort of tough love. Need to be
irreplaceable right now.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't go wrong for them, and I'm assuming it's not going to go wrong for Buchnevich. I mean, these guys, the coaching staff talks to the players as well. It's not like they just walk in the locker room and see that they're scratched and nobody says anything to them. I forgot which beat reporter, it was probably Zapay, but he reported that, Arneal had a long talk with Buchnevich during practice the other day, and I'm sure he was going over what the situation is and why he's not playing right now. And, obviously he was okay with being sent down to Hartford. He didn't make a stink about it or a problem. Yeah. I'm assuming they said, look, we're going to send you down, get a couple of games, get you scoring touchbacks, start feeling good about yourself, and we're going to bring you back up. And now, look, there's injuries every year, and this happens all the time, and Faust is now injured, and he's going to be back up. I mean, it's just the way it always works. I mean, I'm not concerned about him, being unhappy or wanting to go back to Russia. He's going to get his playing time. And he is a big part of the Rangers' future.
Well, I got news on him for you. Game-winning goal in overtime, 2 goals and 1 assist in his return to action in Hartford. So we'll probably see him up tomorrow after a performance like this.
Yeah, you would hope so. I mean, especially with the injury, I'd be shocked if they were calling up. As good as he played, and we mentioned him before, Rivich, you got to bring Buchnevich back up. Again, I'd like to see the lineup changing where you move Grabner down and get Buchnevich back in that top 9 where he belongs. I agree with that. I think that would be a big move and a help to the struggling offense right now.
So lastly, before we conclude this episode here, it's a hard question to ask because they were coming off of a run where they went 8-1-1. But we've seen it. They've been struggling to score goals. They had this 3 straight overtime games, which they won 2 of them. One in the shootout, lost one in the shootout to Montreal. They didn't look that great against Columbus, and they kind of lost their touch yesterday against Washington. Are they in trouble? I mean, we all know they're not up there. They're not the Washingtons and they're not the Penguins of the league. But if you look at the league, they're top 5. Are they in trouble? Do you think they're in trouble? I don't think so.
I mean, I think that they've had a couple of injuries. I think that the schedule is just insane. And I know every team has this schedule as well, but it's just really just unfair to the players. And I look, it's 2 games in a row that they lost, and you're right, the play has slipped a bit, but that happens every year in different parts of the season. There's ebbs and flows. I mean, the only thing that matters is how they're playing going into the playoffs. So I mean, there's plenty of time to sort of right the ship. I'm not concerned, at least right now. In the least, I'm really interested in what Vigneault is going to do with the defense. It should be fascinating to see. I mean, he just has so many moving parts that he could deal with, put together on the defense. I really liked the pairs that he put together today. I mean,
they're going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, they were real nice. I mean, with McDonough and Smith, and then you had the Stahl Holden line. Like I said, they've been struggling, but recently, but for the most part this year they've been good. And then the Shea Clendenning duo is
you love.
Yeah, they've been the best pairing over the last week or so. I mean, they're the ability to bring offense and the first pass out of the defensive zone has opened up a lot, for the Rangers, and they don't really have that with anybody else. McDonough, has done a great job offensively this year, but he just doesn't have the offensive instincts that Shea and Clendenning sort of bring to the table. So I really like that pair. And, if any move, look, I think Girardi gets back in when he's healthy in a couple weeks.
Definitely.
I think Holden is probably the guy who comes out then. I just don't see how you can justify putting Klein in there over any of the guys right now. So that's going to be real interesting to see. I'm looking forward to see how AB deals with it.
We're at the point of the year where I always like to say, you can lose games, but as long as you're playing well, I'm fine. Because I want to be playing well come postseason. That's that time of year we're at. We're down about 16, 17 games now. We should be focusing more on the results. We should be focusing on how they're playing. That's just the way I look at things. I don't know if you look at it like that as well, but I've interacted with several other fans that actually feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's more about the process, and you hear that word a lot from Vigneault.
Process.
You obviously want them playing well, win or lose. The only reason I disagree a little bit is because of the new playoff format. There's sadly strategy now in getting into the playoffs. I mean,
which is a joke.
Yeah, I mean, it really shouldn't be that way. You shouldn't have to think about losing. You shouldn't be rewarded.
Miles did it last year. They tanked for Florida,
and it was the smartest, and it was very smart on their end. The Rangers, it was between the two of them, obviously, for that last spot to play Florida. The Rangers decided they went out and won. I think they beat the Red Wings that day. The Islanders tanked that night.
Last game of the season.
Yeah, I think they pulled the starting goaltender halfway through or something.
I think Tavares was scratched too. Yeah. I remember Rick Carpinello was ripping him the entire night, all on Twitter. It was hysterical.
Yeah, and you know what? You can't even rip them. It's the smartest move. And yeah, you can rip them. And the Rangers did the honorable thing. But guess what? The Rangers were out in the first round, and the Islanders were able to move on to the second round. So yeah, I mean, the NHL, I think, needs to figure out, they need to change that up, because you shouldn't be rewarded for losing. I mean, and you'll look at even whoever's going to win the Atlantic Division. I mean, they're going to be stuck playing, the Rangers or the Blue Jackets in the first round. I mean, meanwhile, Ottawa is going to end up playing, or the second place team is going to end up playing the Bruins and Toronto's good, but the Rangers, who are in a lower position, are the better team. It's sort of the way that the first round shakes out just really isn't fair.
I have the conference standings up on top right here. Looking at it, going off of the old format. If the season ended, the Rangers would still be playing Montreal. Okay. But it would still be the 1-8, so it would be Washington, Toronto, Columbus, Boston, Pittsburgh, Ottawa, Rangers, Canadiens. And the Rangers would be the home team, according to the old system. So the matchups are still kind of similar, a little bit, at least with the... No, they're really not, if actually just thinking about it now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you're going to potentially be rewarding somebody for tanking. I mean, that has no place in the game. And the players will never say they're doing that. I know Stepan the other day had said, we're not thinking about that. We're just going to go out and win. And I'm sure they are. But
you gotta be careful.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can look at when push comes to shove, if it comes down to the last couple of games of the season and you're like, wow, if we win this game, we're going to play Pittsburgh. But if we lose it, we get to go in the Atlantic draw and play, Montreal or the Maple Leafs or Boston or whatnot. I mean, I don't know how you can just say, yeah, we're going to win that game. I mean, you're almost giving yourself sort of the death blow there. It doesn't make sense.
Rangers currently have a 13-point lead over the Toronto Maple Leafs for the first wild card with 19 games remaining. Kevin, thank you for joining us on this special edition of the NYR Zone podcast, trade deadline edition. Anything you want to say before we conclude?
No. I mean, I appreciate you having me on. It was, despite the fact that there wasn't a lot of, trades going on today, it's still always a fun day, and you sort of getting down to the nitty gritty here towards the end of the season. It's, you got a month left, or a month and a week or so left, and it's the frantic finish, to the frantic race to the finish line here. So I'm excited. This is the best time of the year, man. Just everyone should enjoy it.
Most definitely. Thank you for joining us again. Thank you all for listening to this very special edition of the NYR Zone podcast. We will be back next week on Saturday, not Friday. I will be traveling back home on Friday, so no podcast that Friday. Go Rangers. Rangers have a few big games this week against some big teams. It might potential playoff matchup with the Bruins on Thursday. Thank you for listening, Kevin. Thank you for joining us. Have a great week, everybody.